Good to go.
Thank
Great.
you.
Welcome back to Senate Education. Ms. Garces, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
You have the floor, and I know you have, of course, we know Ms. Myers from her work, but we don't know, am I pronouncing it correctly? It's just Soria?
Soria.
Soria,
Yeah.
thank you. The floor is yours, and tell us a little bit about Act One. This is a completely new group of people for the Senate. And so they're all curious about Act One and its implementation.
Great.
Right. And we have until 4 when the physical educators are coming.
Okay.
But will you tell the TV folks 4?
Yeah.
Thanks.
So we'll rush it.
Don't rush it. We can always have you back. It's always, yeah.
Thank you. For the records, my name is Amanda Garces. I'm the Director of Policy, Education, and Outreach for the Vermont Human Rights Commission and the Chair of the Act One Working Group. And
Yeah, I'm Chelsea Myers. I'm the Associate Executive Director at the Vermont Superintendents Association, and I'm here in my capacity as a representative on the Act One Working Group for this entire duration.
I'm Diego Soria. I'm a junior at Montpelier High School, and I'm mentoring Amanda as well as Act One.
Great.
he's in the
It's
work.
nice to have a student here.
So we'll start by just giving you a background of why Act One exists.
Would it be helpful to tell you when we're switching slides if it's not up here?
Sure.
Oh, yeah, that's.
Yeah.
We're on the Remembering the Why 1999 slide.
Okay. Did you want to bring it up? It's up to you.
That's okay if you have it.
Okay, we have it right
fine
here.
with us.
Yeah, sure.
So, so just to give a background of why Act One exists, in 1999, the Advisory Committee in the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights published a report that said that racism in Vermont school was pervasive. They did a follow-up report in 2003 that said some changes were made, but it's still not a priority among school administrators, school boards, elected officials, state agencies charged with civil rights enforcement. In 2017, the Act 54 report, Racial Disparities in State Systems, was issued by the Human Rights Commission and the Attorney General's Office. Task Force concluded that education was one of the 5 state systems in which racial disparities persisted and needed to be addressed. And as a recommendation, they said that we need to change the culture a little bit and also to teach children from an integrated curriculum that represented both the contributions of people of color as well as indigenous people, women, people with disabilities, and fairly accurately represented our history and oppression of these groups.
Are you all familiar with the Youth Risk Behavioral Survey? That provides some pretty valuable data about how our kids are doing. And in 2019, the report found pretty startling information about LGBTQIA youth in our state. For example, twice as likely to have been bullied, 3.5 times as likely to have experienced unwanted sexual contact, and 4.5 times as likely to have attempted suicide in the last 12 months. So pretty startling data.
And so Act One, so Act One was the result of a lot of advocates that came together. So if you think 1990 report, thinks of the grandmas now that were the parents of some of the kids in this school. So these are, it was brought in, it was created and written by a group of grassroots activists who came from BIPOC communities, LGBT communities, and people with disabilities, and disability justice advocates, and really to center the inclusion that was culturally responsive, anti-racist, anti-discrimination. And in 2019, these legislators signed Act One into law.
So the Act One working group consists of state leaders in education, high school students, civil society advocates, and community members who care deeply about the causes of Act One. I'll say from personal experience, it's been one of the most rewarding professional experiences that I've had at VSA. Just a lot of hours, I mean, a lot of hours spent, unfortunately, in Zoom rooms, but building relationships, really diving into the language and thinking about what's best for all kids has been a great experience with all the other education associations, as well as members from the community.
So the working group is 23 members, 4 students. We have Indigenous representatives from the Indigenous community, the Abenaki. We have all the BPA, all the B, as they're called often in these rooms, Curriculum Directors Associations, NEA, my office, which is the Human Rights Commission, the Office of Racial Equity, plus the rest are community members appointed by the Education Justice Coalition, which is a grassroots organization that does education justice in Vermont. So there's all these community members who are advocates in different avenues, from disability rights to LGBTQ rights to Black and Brown families. So for the past 3 years, we focus our charge on the education quality standards. That's basically what we put in, which we see as the floor of our work.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, the education quality standards are a governmental rule from the State Board of Education. And it's really kind of like a blueprint of for education in the state of Vermont. It's looking at what's important for schools to teach in terms of values, objectives, and aspirations, as well as, again, that blueprint on guiding districts as they develop curriculum in their local systems. So I'm sure you've all heard that curriculum is created and adopted locally. So this is not a curriculum document, but instead kind of a blueprint guiding document for the state. And so when we edited the proposed changes in the EQS, we really focused on changes to direct instruction, curriculum, not curriculum itself, but like how curriculum is produced and led at the local level, expanded anti-discrimination protections, professional development of school staff, flexible pathways to learning. That was a big one. Just really thinking about who's accessing flexible pathways and what are the barriers of access to flexible pathways. School board policies and administrative leadership, school community collaboration, and that was really a focus of like what are school boards doing to connect with the community, what policies are in place, that sort of work, and restorative justice practices.
And so in revising, we have kind of this overall thinking, which is our charge, or like how does a document like this promote critical thinking around the histories and contributions and viewpoints, encourages students to really explore questions of ethnic and social identities, provide welcoming spaces for all of our students, and develop pathways for families to really be able to talk about a child's experience related to race, ethnic, or social group identity at school. The statement of purpose basically is what is guiding everything, and it's saying that the underline is our additions to the statement of purpose of the current EQS, which is that schools need to be equitable, anti-racist, culturally responsive, anti-discriminatory, and inclusive. And we add that it should also include independent schools right there.
Some of the ways that Act One wants to support students is creating spaces that improve student well-being. I do a lot of, I guess, listening to a lot of the marginalized groups in our schools, like kids from who have Kazakhstan background, Armenia, South America, like a lot of different groups. And one of the big things that many of them talk about is not being able to feel supported in curriculum. They feel supported by each other, like through culture and through like food and stuff like that. But one of the common struggles that we talk about is not being able to have any influence on the curriculum. And so, yeah.
And that it is for all students, so you'll see a lot of slides, we're not gonna read all of them, but to give you a snapshot of kind of like the work, how we're thinking about students living in poverty. That how do we ask that to recognize and reduce any financial barriers to access flexible pathways, furthering economic justice by asking schools to teach about and help students understand why everyone should have economic opportunities. And then you want to talk a little more about?
Yeah, so really supporting BIPOC students in Vermont, I feel is very important because of my own experiences moving here from Arizona, which is a very diverse place, and coming here, I felt very kind of alone and not supported, not being able to express things like now I can't share like foods with other people, and that's a very isolating feeling. And to know that there's people who are working on creating a more welcoming space in schools here makes not only me feel good, but as well as my peers at the high school, and I'm sure in other high schools.
Yeah, just as Amanda mentioned, we think that the edits are inclusive of all students, and we particularly looked at how the education quality standards can support our LGBTQIA plus youth, especially with the national narrative going on now, just really doubling down on anti-discrimination, equity, and inclusion for those students, and thinking about the language particularly around that. And then we also thought about students with disabilities and how the education quality standards align with our other like federal protections, Act 173, which you heard yesterday. We were really thinking about how can we reinforce and support the other laws on the books that are supporting students with disabilities, and making, of course, inclusive language. So for an example, we added some language about accessible print and multimedia that wasn't in the document before.
For multilingual students, being able to communicate to parents and legal guardians about opportunities for flexible pathways in ways that are culturally and linguistically inclusive. We talked a lot, spent a lot of time about thinking through multilingual families, like my family, and how like that affects me growing up. When I was 16, I had, my mom never had anything translated. We weren't with mom, but like thinking through all of those experiences of how do we really support families who English is second language, whose kids sometimes end up translating for their parents or like their caregivers what they need. So I think, we really had a lot of conversations around being multilingual and about those services that students can get and how they get information in their different languages. Oh, yes.
So at one of our first meetings, we really talked about where this work situates in the context of kind of the education guiding frameworks in Vermont. So I talked about the education quality standard, which is kind of that overarching blueprint of education. So when we think about ethnic and social equity standards, we thought about, and that diagram is from the Vermont Agency of Education, should that be another standalone type course, for example? So you have math and literacy and science standards and global citizenship standards. Should it sit beside it and be another category? Or should it, in the next slide, be situated on top and be a lens in which all the other subject areas are viewed through? And so as a working group, we really thought about that second option of that lens from which all the other standards are viewed through.
Hi, just a quick question. The CCSS, NGSS, C3, what do those stand for? Sorry if you already covered it.
So C3 is the social studies standards that are generally adopted at the local level. The next gen science standards are a national set of standards that are generally adopted at the local level.
Oh, okay.
And then I actually don't know
Was
what
it core
the
curriculum?
acronyms are for
For which one?
literacy and math.
English language arts.
The CCSS. Oh, Common Core, I'm sorry.
Common
Core,
Okay.
yeah.
Got
And these are adopted by the State Board of Education, right? The State Board, and these are the academic standards that have been adopted by them. And our job was to look at these standards to make sure that they were relevant to all of the communities. So that was a decision with our first decision, January 2019 or 20. It was like, are we gonna do our work as a standalone, or is it something that is going to be adopted with everything? So all of the content standards are viewed. So we finished our education quality standards in April. We got a lot of feedback from a lot of people. We submitted to the State Board of Education. And since then, they created a subcommittee that's been looking at this document. And it's about to go into rulemaking process in a few months, where the State Board will look at it. The subcommittees got some public comments. They've made some changes. We've kind of been collaborating back and forth with the Action Working Group to ensure that it's alignment or that they understand the whole context. And so hopefully in the next few months, they will be voting on it. The rulemaking process will go through and the state will adopt that. As part of our last work, what we're working on right now, do you want to talk about that?
Do you want to talk about the policies?
Sure. Oh, yes.
We also formed a policy subcommittee group that will be looking at, are there any policies that are maybe missing from required policies or model policies at VSBA that could help support this work, especially like around the school board function of the changes that we're asking for. So we haven't gotten very far into that work, but that is kind of another stage in the final stages of the work.
So we'll be done June 30th. By then, we will have a set of recommendations around policies that will crosswalk with anything that we're making. And the legislature approved $50,000 in the last year to support our work with a consultant. So we failed 3 attempts of the simplified bid for Rico's proposal, but now we have an amazing team of consultants who are ethnic studies experts who are helping us build an ethnic studies framework. So there's a subcommittee that was created that is meeting every week for like 3 hours and like diving deep, and then we'll be done with hopefully that by May, and we will close shop in June. So in your last few slides, we just wanted to give you what a framework looks like, and there's some examples in there. New York State Education Department has a framework that they use, Washington State, and so that's kind of what we're gonna be building for Vermont, is a framework that then will be used, hopefully with all the content standards. So when they're looking at math, there will be components that, teachers, when they're building their curriculum, will be thinking about to meet those standards. So that's kind of, I won't go into that. Those last slides were created by our friend Michael Martin, who's the Curriculum Directors Association rep. But yeah, so I know we only have 10 minutes. So if you have questions for us.
I'll really quickly add, Amanda McRae from the Vermont Principals Association and I have been doing quite a bit of traveling around the state, talking to different stakeholders about what they think they're going to need for implementation, and really just getting the word out there at different opportunities and having discussions about like what's the fear, and like really building on the fact that a lot of this work is already happening and uplifting it and thinking about it from a system-wide perspective. So that's just starting, but I think it's been really rewarding experience, and we'll need more of that for sure.
Oh, wait.
So what's sort of a before and after, if you will? What does education look like before this is implemented, and what does it look like after? Is it the lens itself, how we're looking? Can you just say something about that? constituent were to say, hey, just give me the quick skinny on this, what is it?
Go ahead.
I think we could start, if it's okay, with a story as an example of like where the story about your classroom experience and what that looks like could potentially be the type of experience that students are hopefully going to experience statewide.
Oh, okay.
That'd be great.
So I had an English teacher in my sophomore year who I made a really good connection with. We just like really connected deeply.
Yeah.
And I asked him about one day what he thought about the topic. When in the English language, a lot of people, when they say America, it's specifically talking about the United States, but America in itself is not just the US, but it's South America, the United States, Mexico, Canada, it's that whole part. And there's a song that was that went pretty viral, and it's called This Is Not America. And it has a lot of just like, the artist is kind of just showing like all of the Latino side of things and how it impacts the United States, and how just the Latino experience feeling like kind of like quieted down, I guess. And he offered that it was a great opportunity for his class, so I helped him teach the class one day with that song, and I analyzed it with the class and made those connections. So I think with that question, like just kind of incorporating all those things to like give kids a more open view
Your
of
perspective.
Yes, I hear voice and choice, sense of belonging, cultural representation in the curriculum, student-driven content. I think it's like the perfect embodiment of what we're hoping for across classrooms.
And what we do here is that this document is in some ways in Vermont, the practice is ahead of the document, right? Like there are some
It's happening, like
educators
you
that
said.
are already doing
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
think that's really important for us to like really, that what you're doing with it, what we're doing with this is really supporting those educators that are really doing this work, that are trying and attempting to have like the students be, all students have like find their way, so.
Finding that just helps your education, I suspect. So, I mean, we all have to find those passions, those interests, and if we're not feeling recognized, then that's hard. Yeah. That's cool.
Thank you so much for being here. This is so important. And I can't help but, as we just were talking about school construction, is I'm thinking, how are we going to build culturally responsive schools, the physical structure when the time comes? So I'm really excited about that. But I also just wanted to say, this work is so critical, not only for our BIPOC students to be able to see themselves in the classroom and in the curriculum, but for me, growing up in Vermont, there's so much I didn't learn, and I've had to kind of recoup it as an adult. And I often feel a little bit sort of angry about how narrow my education was. So I'm really hoping that this expands what we learn in terms of lived histories and the truth, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the whole kit and caboodle of complex histories. And so I really appreciate this. Thank you very much. And thanks for coming after school. I'm sure you're exhausted, but thank you for being here.
I ran through from the high school.
Okay.
Senator Hashim.
I just wanted to say, so Act 1 was actually the very first bill that I voted on in the House, and the House, because they're so wonderful, wanted to make sure that this was at the top of the priority list. And I remember after voting, I was like, I wonder what this is going to look like in 2 or 3 years. So it's really wonderful to see the work you're doing. And at least for my district, I can't remember the numbers, but I know Windham County is one of the fastest changing when it comes to demographics. And I think this is setting a good stage for our students and adults across the state. So thank you.
Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it.
So we do have 4 recommendations for you.
Yeah.
So we
just
Hold on, let me
Oh,
get my
three.
thing out.
encouraging the state board to adopt the recommended
Yeah.
changes for formal rulemaking would be helpful. And then considering this work and, the principles of this work when working on any new instructional initiatives or any initiatives in general. The example is like school construction,
Yeah.
And Winooski School District is a great example of how school design can be really critical for communities. And then explore, I think, talking with the Agency of Education on the implementation of this work and what the plan is, because I think that teachers are gonna need to feel really supported in this. It can be really scary in some communities to implement this, and we just wanna make sure that we're bolstering that support as much as possible.
And I think with the new instructional initiatives, I think it's really important, as we're building this framework too, that we're really connecting all the pieces. I think that when we think of ethnic studies, it's like, okay, like there's a class, it's like, no, like this framework is really going to be impacting a lot of things. And, we have really amazing experts that are helping us build this, and we just don't want it to be like, okay, they created that and it's gonna be on the shelf. It's like, how does it really connect with everything as a lens for all of our students? And I want to emphasize that we really mean it when we say all of our students, like really deeply, every working group member really believes that this is not just for our BIPOC students, but that all of our students will benefit. So, and how we see that capacity being built for like something is that the practices already happen, and we have really amazing educators and doing really good work, and that we should also support them. And like we were like thinking like this mentorship idea, like how do they who have already doing, who are connected, who really have it down to support others that really want to do it but don't know what kind of questions they ask, because that's really the most important questions. Like they're afraid because they don't know, because we didn't learn these things, because there's a lot of work that we're gonna have to do deeply to think about like how our position and how we implement this, right? So that we really support them, but that we support them as a team, that is not just one teacher, but that like, here, we're gonna pay you so that we can help create some units that other ones can learn. And so I think there's really great educators, and I just wanna lift them up because this work is possible because of that. So
It would be helpful if you'd be willing to maybe just keep in your mind, identify a few of those folks, maybe after crossover, when we finish with, what we passed to the House, we might have some time there to have them come in, give us a sense of how they're teaching, what they're teaching. That would be really, really interesting. And always, it's great to have students come in and talk to us. That makes a big
Future
difference.
senator, maybe?
Yeah, it's Washington County, right?
Yes.
Percival's been there
Senator
long.
County.
Thank you all very much.
Thank
Good to
you.
see you.
I appreciate
Thanks a
it.
million. Yeah, appreciate it. Great work. Ian, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Want to have a seat? So we have, roughly 25 minutes or so.
Sure, we should have a couple people signing on too.
Great. And we'll let you lead the discussion, or lead the sort of part of the conversation. And
you read that.
Mark and Lisa.
Human rights commission? Is that what this is?
physical education.
Right. Hello,
Pat?
Yeah.
Good to see you.
good to see you too.
So we've asked you here a couple of weeks ago, we had people in the committee, and then we were actually visited by Miss Vermont, who has also raised some interesting questions around physical education and health education. And so a couple of things just for you to think about to help set the table for the conversation. I would say, we'd like to know what physical education looks like in this space. How often are students getting it? I, for one, am a little concerned maybe they're not getting as much. So love to know that. Health education also. We don't have to go through everything about health education, but one of the things that Miss Vermont said that I thought was very interesting was how can we use health education as a vehicle for young people to identify some of their struggles, mental health issues that they might be dealing with, and, you know, just techniques, just acknowledging those mental health issues, trying to capture some of those mental health issues and getting them the assistance they need, knowing that they're not alone, and kind of what they might be feeling and thinking about is just also normal stuff, possibly. So that is where we're at. So anything you can do to help us would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the focus today is mostly
Oh,
on
we have some testimony. Great.
physical education.
Yeah.
That I can.
That won't
absolutely-
stop us from asking.
I was gonna say, I can
questions
absolutely talk
on
about
other
health
things.
education. I am my name is Ian Rochford. I'm the health and physical education content specialist within the proficiency-based learning team within the student pathways division at the Agency of Education. So
Great.
my background is in health education and physical education.
Before you start,
Yeah.
for the
Yes,
record,
please.
Pat Fitzsimmons, I'm the proficiency-based learning team leader, and Ian is one of the great members of my team. We're in student pathways, and Ian has been working at the agency now for 6 months.
All of 6 months.
Okay.
So
He's a rock star. You're
Yeah.
so lucky to have him.
We'll see.
I'll introduce myself on Zoom.
so I'm gonna-
You're able to hear us too, Mark and myself,
Yeah.
Mark's colleague.
So I'm going to start off with a little bit of kind of an overview of what it looks like across the state, looking at state
Great.
statute. This is kind of the basis for why do we have physical education in Vermont. We're joined by a participant or a physical educator who teaches at Floodbrook School, and then Lisa Cleveland, who is the physical education teacher education coordinator at Castleton University, or the Vermont System University. So they're going to be able to talk a little bit more about the practice and also some of the things that they're seeing in the field, but I can provide kind of an overview at the state level, and even, you know, looking at what does it look like across the different schools in Vermont, because it does. So I did type something up. I'm going to read some of it. So health and physical education, this course of study provides students with essential skills for healthy living after high school. Students who participate in physical education are almost twice as likely to maintain a healthy level of physical activity after graduation. Research also suggests that greater opportunities to engage in physical activity and physical education within the school day are connected with student academic achievement, behavior management, overall health, and also connected to school attendance. So physical education in Vermont supports student health in a context where student health needs have grown in many areas, which this Vermont talked a little bit about. Based on 2019 Youth Behavior Risk Survey data, which Dr. Group also mentioned, a quarter of Vermont high school students reported an overweight weight to height ratio. A quarter of high school students in the same survey also reported that they did not meet U.S. Department of Health physical activity recommendations, which is essentially just 60 minutes of physical activity a day. LGBT students reported both lower rates of physical activity and higher rates of obesity than their other student counterparts. The growing mental health needs of students in Vermont has also been discussed here, and physical education is therefore important for all Vermont students. So overview, and then I can talk a little bit about what the Vermont State Statute Board Rule says about that, and that provides a lot of the framework for how it actually is implemented in the state. So there are several statutes that provide direction to physical education practice. Physical education is noted as a required course of study in 16 VSA 906, just as English is. 16 VSA 136 provides further nuance to what physical education should look like in the state, as it defines physical education as a sequential, developmentally appropriate program that is an enjoyable experience for students and is designed to help students develop the knowledge, skills, self-management skill, attitudes, and confidence needed to adopt and maintain physical fitness throughout their lives.
So how often does it happen? Does that go district to district?
That's
or-
going down here into the education. So the education quality standards. So the paragraph below that talks a little bit about the tiered systems of support within physical education, which are an important part and required by federal and state law. But Vermont State Board of Education, as written into EQS, also states each school shall provide students in grades K through 8 with at least 2 physical education classes per week. Each school shall provide students in grades 9 through 12 with 1 and 1/2 years of physical education or the equivalent thereof. So that's what's in EQS.
How does that compare to other states?
That's a great question. I'll have to look into that.
Okay, I mean, we can also, but it would be great if you would email Hayden Ross, if you could give us a
Sure.
sense of where we are.
In comparison, absolutely.
So again, so generally, 2 days a week? Is that what
2 days a week, K through 8, and these folks can probably talk a little bit about what that might look like in practice.
And 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 50 minutes?
That's, again, I would say that
Okay.
it ranges.
Yeah.
And I would suggest talking to some of the folks that are in practice, because yes, I think it ranges. I know it ranges.
So while we have on this
Sure.
topic, would one of you just let us know how often, so it sounds 2 times a week, but how many minutes are kids really getting some serious exercise? I'm looking at you, Mark.
Yep, I can gladly chime in. Yes, so the mandate is 2 times weekly, and I'm a K-8 health and PE teacher. But it is always it is based on the school schedule. So there's no time frame in that statute, which is the downfall, right? I'm always striving to get my kids 60 minutes of exercise daily, but currently my schedule is 35-minute classes twice a week for my K to 6 or K to 5 kids, sorry, and my 6 through 8 kids see me 3 times a week for 35 minutes. And that has fluctuated from as many as 45 minutes in my career here at Floodbrook. You know, so I've been here since 2005. Sometimes I've had them for 45 minutes. Sometimes I've had them for an hour. Sometimes I've had them for as short as 30 minutes. So because there's no time frame in that statute, it definitely leaves it up to the district's discretion. And even within my own BRSU, I'm in the BRSU supervisory union. We're striving to get some consistency, but that has been hard for us as well. We're trying to say to our superintendent, we would at least like the kids being the same within our SU, but even within our own SU, we have timeframes all over the place. We're seeing them twice a week, but that is it.
So Mark, you've been at this for a while, almost 20 years, it sounds like.
Yeah, I've been in Vermont since 2005. I started teaching in 1997, so 25 years, sir.
Yeah, so are you seeing greater obesity issues or less, or can you just say something about that?
Yeah, I don't know if it's, yeah, like, yeah, I guess that's just an objective question. I think it's, you know, it comes and goes. I guess it depends on the group of kids in the class and their upbringing. You know, there's a lot of factors that go into that, right?
Yeah.
So, COVID has definitely been a hit for a lot of the kids. I know like fitness testing is a big question mark out there for a lot of people, but you know, that has been a great realization for my kids here because we've been doing it forever. It's part of what I do here. The kids that have been doing it were some of my best comments from kids have been like, holy cow, no exercise for 1 year has really impacted how many, like, you know, how good my flexibility is, how well I can run. So I think it was great for me to be doing that pre-COVID. And then after COVID, it was awesome for those kids to come back to the gym and be like, holy cow, I'm out of shape. So I think it goes back and forth between the two.
Thank you. Senator,
just out of curiosity, are students ever evaluated for obesity? Formally, is that, is there ever a weight, body mass index review with students, or was that just not somewhere?
Not within PE, not within my curriculum. Most of it has been through our physicals that we have kids get through the pediatrician. So we have that within our school umbrella that is done via pediatrician.
Okay, very good. That answers the question.
So our nurse holds all that data then. So she collects that and has that. So I see that, like I have access to it, but it's not part of something that I do within PE as far as measuring that in PE. We talk about it, but we don't actually measure it.
Thank you.
Yes, and so thank you, Mark, for that. I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of the kind of overall trends. So if you turn to this lovely page, there's some bullet points out, some statistics that come from a variety of sources: Vermont Agency of Education, Vermont Department of Health, U.S. Department of Education, and these are related mostly to public schools. So just not to read every single one, but pulling out a couple things of importance. In 2020, 3/4 of Vermont schools require physical education teachers to follow a written physical education curriculum. Also, in 2020, nearly half allow for the use of waivers, exemptions, or substitutions for physical education requirements. Looking at school improvement plans, this data is also from 2020. Although it's increased the level that health education and physical activity are built into school improvement plans, we saw a noticeable dip between 2018 and 2020, meaning that physical education goals are less included within school improvement plans as they were from 2018 to 2020. And also looking at the teacher level in both 2020 and 2021, there's been a statewide shortage of physical education teachers in Vermont. In 2021, there were 19 physical educators granted first-year provisional or emergency licenses to teach in the state. And then you can look at kind of at this back page. This is just a breakdown of different courses that are offered and attendance within them. So there is a range of courses that exist. And these are PE credit-like courses. So, and actually, I was going to hand over my time to these folks who, as I said, 6 months, but also lots of experience up here, to talk a little bit about the preparation part as well as the little bit of practice.
And did you want to add anything before we go?
I'm good, thank you
Okay,
for
all
asking.
right, yeah, okay.
I guess that's my cue then. Thank you. I'm sorry I'm appearing on Zoom. But it's been a busy time here at Castleton, especially given the library closures and the nutty stuff going on here. So I'm happy to talk about physical education. And likewise, if you have health education questions, I could probably answer those as well. This is my 19th year here at Castleton. Again, as Ian mentioned, I'm the teacher education coordinator here. I oversee the preparation of our students who are going to become teachers, not only in Vermont, but whatever other state they travel back to. And right now, a lot of them are traveling back to home states. They are not staying in Vermont. We place the majority of our students in Vermont schools. We also, though, have a typical number of maybe a quarter every year that we place in New York schools as well. I know probably 2/3 of the physical educators in Vermont. They've either come through my program or I know them through other professional organizations. So I am literally in the schools watching what's going on. My student teachers are in the schools telling me what's going on. And we're doing the training to try to improve the quality of physical education as well as health education in our schools. Probably the biggest takeaway I can give you today is the inequity I see in schools across the state, where we have teachers that are highly qualified, teachers that are struggling, teachers that do not have the time to teach their students. In Rutland, where Senator Weeks and Senator Williams, your kindergartners are getting 1 day a week by one of the best teachers I know, because that's what they're allotted. And I know that time is precious, and there's a lot that goes on in schools, but the intent of providing quality daily physical activity is really tough when students aren't becoming physically educated to want to be physically active beyond the PE class. And that's really what a successful PE class is. We tell our teacher candidates, it's not what you're doing in your class, it's what they're taking from your class and what the kids are doing beyond your classroom time. That's when you know you're successful. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have about teacher preparation or physical education or health education in general in Vermont.
Well, that was very helpful, just to know that there are kindergartners out there that are just getting that 1 day, and we're really talking, could be 20 minutes. And from where I'm sitting, it's great socialization. It's great, post-COVID, like Mark said, getting back into the physical act part of life. And so, frankly, it's just disappointing. So I think one of the things we can learn from the agency is whether or not, well, I guess maybe start with you, Lisa. What is this hitting up against? What is it when a kindergartner is only getting 20 minutes a week? What's happening there? Are people just saying, we can't find the time because the kids have to be doing what? Can you help us with that?
That's what I hear from my teachers in the field. We're not getting
Okay.
the time because there is so much other stuff going on in schools.
Okay.
And, it's all valuable. It's all valuable time.
Yeah.
So the new role I think that physical educators are really trying to take on in schools as well is addressing the social emotional needs of our youth. We're trying to train our teacher educators to address those SEL outcomes. It's not about we need to be competitive in sport. It's about let's figure out how we're going to have students self-regulate and not get anxious or angry at one another. And so trying to modify our curriculum to meet the needs of current students. But again, if students aren't getting the time to practice those skills, to learn those skills, then the preparation doesn't matter here.
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, if I could, oh, go ahead. I was just gonna piggyback on that if you don't mind.
We just have a question and then we'll go to you, Mark.
Well,
Okay.
this may be a big one that's not really answerable, but I have heard, and I think other countries espouse this notion of more academic work doesn't necessarily mean better academic outcomes, and that there is a place where more structured play and physical activity actually will lead to more learning. And you don't need to give me any data around that, but it is an interesting concept, and I guess I'm interested in learning more about that as we talk about this.
That's a great point, Senator Gulick. The data's been out there for 20 years. And again, I think that data is going to shift now more towards social emotional outcomes, given what we experienced through the pandemic and what the additional needs of students are now. But you're right on target. The academic benefits for quality physical activity are there. And I'll let Mark speak here.
Senator Williams has a question.
So what I'm hearing is, we have a shortage of PE teachers.
Absolutely.
And the administration is deciding that PE takes a backseat to other learning needs. And I've also seen school buses going by my place in my town at 2:45. So how do we put it all into one day? Do we expand the day for the educators and the students?
So as far as the shortage in teachers right now, pre-COVID, again, this is my perception. I'm the person that writes recommendations for students to get jobs. It was a competitive market. Schools weren't hiring as many teachers. Teachers were staying longer in their jobs. School districts were taking physical educators and splitting them between schools or hiring them as a 0.5 or a 0.8. This weird system where you're not a whole professional during the day, you're a 0.8 professional. Right. COVID saw, just like other content areas, a plethora of teachers retiring and leaving early. And I've told my students, you are in the best job market you'll ever be in. That being said, we're not keeping up with supporting our students here to finish student teaching. They find that it's not what it's cracked up to be. It's hard. They're seeing violence in schools. Kids are fighting. They recognize they're not being supported as physical educators, and they say, I'm going to go into a different career. So the other thing that's happened over the last 10 years, there's really two physical education programs left in the state, Norwich and us, Castleton. UVM, they're teaching out right now, so they're not accepting any new students, and most of their grads left the state. Norwich, because of the nature of Norwich's program, a lot of their students leave the state. Those that stay, they're wonderful. They're highly qualified. And as I mentioned, about a quarter of ours were already placing New York. They're not coming back to Vermont to work, where they can get better pay or better support. So I'm optimistic about coming out of COVID and the cohort of students we have coming up. But right now, we definitely are in like this weird place where there's nobody available. There's no one taking jobs. I literally 2 hours ago had one of my former students asking me, I'm going on maternity leave. Do you have anybody that could take my spot for 6 months? And I'm like, they're already gone. So
Mark?
So yeah, I got a bunch of notes on all of that. Perfect. So I could chime in, just follow Lisa on the tidbit of just the teachers, right? Like we have a great program at Floodbrook, right? We have a full-time PE teacher, we have a full-time health person, we have a full-time guidance counselor, we have a full-time social worker. Like we are ready for all of it, right? Our program was so good that our supervisory union has duplicated it across the school, across our SU. So our health teacher moved to another school that was closer to her, right? She was awesome. She was here for 8 years. She was a Castleton grad, right? We just recently replaced her. So it's been 1.5 years to try to find a health teacher to replace her. Therefore, all of that work, not in a bad way, sort of got kicked back to me, where I'm teaching both health and PE, cramming it into my schedule, right? Luckily, we found someone that is, going to be here to teach, right? So it's one of these things of like, for us, we were doing a great job. Everybody recognized we were doing a great job. They duplicated what we're doing across our whole SU, and now we lost one of our great teachers. She's still with us. She's just in a different building, right? So that's one piece of that, right? I agree with the structured play piece, right? One of my greatest comments I get from middle school kids all the time is they want to get rid of recess and have more PE. They want to be with the PE teacher doing structured activity, going hiking, snowshoeing, playing volleyball in a structured fashion as opposed to recess, right? I have way less discipline problems when I have them structured and doing something as opposed to out at recess. So that's sort of dealing with that recess question a little bit and structured play. And then back even further, someone's comment about just time frame, right? If I see the kids twice weekly, which is the state mandate right now, 30 minutes, there's only 36 weeks in a school year. That's 36 hours. I only see the kids for 36 hours for physical education within a school year. Sometimes that resonates with parents about how little I actually see them. Like 36 hours is not much time for me to spend with them throughout a school year. Now, how I've countered this a little bit is I've definitely have taken stuff out of my classroom, right? So I've gotten I got a grant for snowshoes. I've assigned those to a classroom, right? There's a classroom teacher that takes the kids snowshoeing instead of me. So I'm getting them active elsewhere, right? I started with COVID. We started sending home gear in my SU. So instead of the kids, if we're doing jump roping in class, I'm sending a jump rope home for the kids. So my budget and some grant money and some local, finance people here are seeing value in that. So if I'm playing soccer, we're buying a soccer ball for every kid in our school, in kindergarten, and they have a soccer ball so that they can actually play. So I just got a grant for cross-country skis, so I have a great two classrooms that have enough cross-country skis to go cross-country skiing. And I've trained them in PE class, and now the classroom teacher is just taking them out, and they're doing that instead of recess. They're going cross-country skiing, right? So there's sort of ways around it, but, again, that's depends on the PE teacher as well, right? That's my passion. So I'm very proactive in that aspect. Other PE teachers might not be as proactive as I am. So I'm just trying to have a great program here and keep that rolling, right? I have to fight every year to keep my health teacher, to keep my full-time guidance counselor, to keep my full-time social worker, right? Those are constant things that are on the chopping block, but there are people that are needed here to keep this place running smoothly. Sorry, so that was a lot. That was getting to everybody's little tidbits as I was taking notes.
Thank you.
We appreciate that you have the fire in your bellies. We really do. No, I mean that. And I'm going to ask Ian, would you mind coming back in 2 weeks? Aiden will arrange it. And of course, Pat, you're more than welcome, of course, to join us.
Yeah, I like to just to hear it.
Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah. Somebody come back in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I'd like to know this comparison between other states.
Sure.
And I'd like to know if you can make the case for more physical education. I mean, some kind of greater mandate. Behavior issues, I'm not an expert, but it just seems to me that a lot of this stuff is popping up and could be addressed, perhaps, with somebody could write Sam way off, but physical activity is so important for all of us. We all feel more relaxed, I think, calmer if we get out and have that kind of physical activity, right?
Yeah.
So, yes.
So I was a kindergarten teacher for many years.
Yeah.
And I just want to say that 30 minutes includes your transition to J
Yeah, no, it's-
and leaving it. So
Wow.
it's not really 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to say, I think I'm getting her name right, Robin Newton from Virginia.
Yes, sorry.
The PE teacher of the year. She has an amazing
teacher.
program, or the teacher of the year,
Mhm.
sorry. She has a really interesting program that connects the brain, physical activities, and academics. So she is someone I think you would really
We
like to
talked
invite.
about getting her, I think the agency mentioned, so maybe in 2
Yeah,
weeks,
scheduling
everybody
thing.
should come back
Yeah.
for, just have this conversation, should
Sure.
we be mandating more? And I appreciate, Mark, really very much that, you're getting kids on cross-country skis and snowshoes. Some kid leaves Vermont and kind of expect that kid to know how to cross-country ski, snowshoe, and have some kind of experience, if we can give it to them. So the other piece of this is, what does the agency look like around grants and things like that to make sure that that kind of equipment, I kind of think of it, I'm sure everybody does, skills for life.
Mhm.
I mean, my brother loved lacrosse, but he's not going out with the lacrosse stick anymore. And but you do play golf forever, ski, you still throw the lacrosse ball around with the kids. I get that. But, what are those things we can do so people do it for life? Yeah.
Skiing is what made my college decision
Yeah.
to go to UVM.
Mhm.
Maybe not the best way to make a decision, but it's.
Well,
good.
that, I agree, that might not have been.
Yeah.
No, kidding. Yeah.
Yes, I can definitely bring some more data and kind of a sense of what's currently happening. Obviously, we're not in the legislative business of making policies or suggestions of that nature, but I can definitely gather some data.
Right,
Be
right.
helpful
If
for
you want to make.
making
You
a
can
decision.
influence.
Yeah, exactly. Yes,
State of play.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yep.
Great to see you.
Yes, thank you.
Really appreciate it. Look forward to maybe seeing you
Thank
again. in a
you.
couple-
Anytime.
Thank you so
You're
much.
more than welcome to come visit at any time.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Same here. We'd love to have you on campus, see what we do.
Yeah.
It
Terrific.
is so nice to be back in person. I have to
Yes,
say.
yes.
It
We'll
is
leave it there.
wonderful, though, that you have the videos for people to look
Yes.
at later.
Mhm.
because
Yeah,
I've
absolutely.
enjoyed looking at some of the testimony and learning what people are thinking. So thank
That's
you for
great.
doing that.